right, so it does look like we have a quorum. So I think we can call the meeting to order. Can I get a motion to open the meeting?
So moved.
You. And a second, great. Let's do a roll call vote. Peter? Peter, can you hear me? Can someone shoot a text over to Peter and see if he's having some technical difficulties?
Just dropped off.
Oh,
So
yeah, apparently. All right, then we'll start with you, Dan.
aye.
Brendan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Jane? Was that an aye?
Yes, it was. Sorry.
Yep. Wasim?
Oh, what are we starting the meeting?
Yeah, just starting the
Aye.
meeting. Great. I'm also an aye. All right. So then 7:03, we are calling the meeting to order. This is the Sherborn Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, January 12th. We have got Dan Sickle, Brendan Daly, Mark Albers, Jane Matarazzo, Wasim Basili, and myself, Stephen Tsai. And we're waiting on a couple more, but I think we'll just get going with the agenda. So first we have the reading of the agenda, then addition of topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting. Does anybody have anything that they wanted to add to the agenda? All right, hearing none. We will then have liaison reports. Then we're going to have the current meeting items, which again is just going to be the fiscal year 23 budgets for the following departments: recreation, cemetery, fire and pond, personnel, and board of health. I also realized, I think I made this mistake last year also, but I added personnel board, but personnel board is a volunteer board. They have no paid staff and they have no operating budget, so they have no budget. They don't actually need to have a budget meeting, but Vicki Relis is here anyways. She just misses her time on advisory, I guess. So yeah, so we may just discuss some sort of personnel board and how you guys maybe can be involved in the budget process, because I do want personnel board to be sort of more involved in salary issues with the budgets in general. So I just wanted to see how you guys felt about that. And then we have Board of Health, and then we will vote on the previous meeting minutes. And I believe Brendan Daly is taking the minutes for tonight's meeting. Thank you, Brendan. Great. Well, if nobody has any questions or comments about the agenda, I would propose that we just move right into it. So first up, we have recreation, and I know Dave Goldberg is here. Let me just grab your budget and share it on the screen, unless you had anything you wanted to share.
No, I don't have anything to share, so you can just
All right.
go the
All
budget.
right, I'll just all right, is that legible for everybody?
Yeah, I can see it.
Great. All right, I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions for you about this one, Dave, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
and
sure.
let us know what's going on here.
Well, I should start by saying that the 135 is on the wrong line. It really isn't field improvements. It's meant to be field maintenance. So that's the only thing I would say in terms of tweaking it. But this is based off of a quote that we received to basically manage and maintain the fields organically. The past few years, we've pretty much, I would say done what we can to keep the fields in the shape that they're in. We probably on average run about $6,000-7,000 in spending on fertilizer, seed, aeration, tining, which is something we don't do very often, but needs to be done more often than what we're doing now. And so essentially we're asking for an increase in budget to bring the fields up to the quality that, this will bring them closer. It won't be pristine, but certainly the quality that we would expect in town in terms of playing surface.
Hey, Dave, is this an annual thing or something that's big this year and then smaller in the coming years, or how do you see that working?
It's an annual thing, and I can walk you through what's included in the maintenance. Hold on, I just gotta pull up an email.
Yeah, because I noticed that you essentially basically you zeroed out every other line, and so I just assumed that what you're doing is then you're contracting out to somebody else to essentially take care of everything.
Exactly. Let me just, I thought I had it up. Yeah, so this would be aeration. So aerating twice per year, overseeding, deep tine aeration, top dress, so putting sand on the fields, organic fertilizer, lime as needed, and then miscellaneous work, fill holes, and make sure that there's no hazards out on the field and so forth. So it really is completely outsourcing the maintenance of the actual turf itself to try and get it up to better conditions than what we have right now.
Did we just not do that before, or do we have that equipment, or?
Well, no, we have not. We've been outsourcing it, but it's been at a much lower level than what we're talking about here. Doug, you could probably speak to what we've been doing in the past, but mostly we've been, with the budget that we have, we've been just trying to keep it as as playable as possible. But I don't know that there's anyone who will say that the fields are where they could be.
No, I hear you. How much was it last year? Because I'm having trouble finding a comparable.
So we spent about, last year, because I'm trying to figure out the fiscal years. This past year we spent about 22,000, but we put a lot into it. That came out of our revolving fund. The year before that we spent, I think, 7,000. The year before that we spent 6. It's not broken out in the spending numbers, but we do keep track of it.
Okay. But so this year, none of it is going to come out of the revolving fund as it did in prior years?
Yeah, we just don't have the money in the revolving fund. If you look at what we bring in versus what we spend, that $6,000 was about what we felt we could absorb
Right.
in terms of maintaining. Without an increase in revenue, we would just be drawing down the revolving fund over the coming years.
I hear you. Then one last question, Dave, if you don't mind. I assume you bid out for this and had multiple bids, and this was the lowest one.
So we actually went out and again, I know I keep referring to Doug, but he went out and talked to a number of different companies that do this. We got one quote. A lot of them are shorthanded. Some of them not interested in the business at all. I think a lot of rec departments do this in-house because they have full-time staff and equipment and so forth. So Doug, maybe you can just comment on the number of people you talk to, and but it is based off of one quote that we feel is pretty accurate. I know that we're going to get significantly less than what we have, but I'll let you talk, Doug.
Right. There are very few companies, landscaping companies out there that are interested in doing this, that aren't interested in doing this year round. They much rather take the smaller jobs. The company that I received a quote from does probably, he was saying this morning, 20 to 30 other towns this way. Some are colleges, some are private schools and stuff, but it seems to be the way that it's trending is to be going this way because town workforces are just being crunched with shortness of employees, but very tight budgets, and they just can't do it in-house anymore. So they're going out. The work that they do is easier for everybody involved, but there is a, as you see, a cost to it. And this is to give us a good playing fields. Right now, I can find enough money to fertilize once a year. I try to do it in the fall, which is the best time to do it. If we have funds, I try to get another fertilization in late or very early spring. If I have to, I'll push it to between spring and summer, the beginning of summer. The fields are just taking an awful lot of beating. We have teams, Dover Sherborn plays on our fields, we play on their fields. So it's trade-offs that we have. And we just need to improve the fields that we have. My experience is everybody is safer on better fields that are maintained at a higher level. We do have a good clump of dandelions that cause problems on our younger soccer teams as kids spend time picking dandelions and not playing the game. It's the type of that thing. We have clover. I don't mind clover being on a field, but we have chickweed. We have very poor drainage at Fesden. We refer to what they call deep tining, where they drive a rod down 8 inches into the ground and it fractures the ground, and then we top dress it with sand, and that helps do the drainage. But again, for the last 2 or 3 years, we weren't able to afford it, and it's been a problem. But this year we got out there already, and it's remarkably better already. When after a rain, we don't have to wait 2 or 3 days. We can get on it usually within 24 hours, which is huge. So that's what we're looking for in the long run.
And I should say, we haven't contracted with anyone yet. There's nothing that keeps us from putting this out to bid. We just feel like, this is a pretty good estimate of what we're going to see if we were to go and bid it out.
It's Jameson and Laurel Fields. Is there other ones I'm missing?
Fesden.
Okay.
So that would include all 3 of them. It's about, what is it, 20 acres?
It's about 12 acres, 4 Jameson, 4 at Fesden, and 8-ish. Oh, now 6 I was just told. We're going back and forth on a few acreages. I'm getting it remeasured by someone in the town to make sure we're not paying for more than we have.
Can I get in with a couple of questions? This is Dan Sickle.
Sure.
I don't know if this is for Dave or for Doug, but wondering if you were going to say on a scale of 1 to 10, quality of the fields now and the quality and how much of an improvement there'd be in the quality of fields, since I'm not an expert on field quality, kind of roughly how big an improvement does this represent?
I would say our fields are probably about a 4 now compared to the towns that were playing around us.
Okay.
We don't have irrigation. I don't foresee us getting irrigation due to the cost of it. So
Right.
we're never going to make it to a 10, but it would be substantial. The field would be more playable. It would be a level of surface. Right now, at the end of in the fall, a good example is we seeded a parcel, I believe it was a year ago. So it had good standing grass on it. The kids played on it this fall, and it's back to just dirt over at Laurel Farm. So it's just the abuse.
So Doug, where do you think this brings us to? Like a
Yeah.
This would probably get us to a 8.
Okay.
If we can stay on it. That which I think everybody would be comfortable with. We do move the goals around on all the different fields, so there's no wear patterns. We try to stay away from those, and that's been helping. We go out and we fertilize, and we can't afford slice seeding, so it's a trick I learned years ago. You go out and you throw grass seed down on soccer fields and let the kids run around and cleat it in, and you get good germination. And so we were doing that in front of goals every other game, basically. So, but it would bring us up to about an 8.
Okay, that's really helpful. Is there an option that you considered that would be something like what's been done in the past plus as compared to going all the way up to 4 to 8? I'm partly asking, this isn't about recreation, but just this is going to be a crazy year for the town with the budget. So everybody's thinking hard about, every expense and what budgets look like. So was there something considered that would be like not jumping up to 135K, but sort of what was done in the past plus something more that would do a little bit of a better job?
I did look at there are different options out there. There's always different options. Something that we could do would be to evaluate the fields, bring in some people that have more turf experience and have them look at the fields, and maybe we could try to slide one in, do it 1 year, add another one the next year or halfway through. Something like that is an option, but all 3 of our complexes get heavy use.
Yeah.
You also run into the, potentially the more you make it a smaller project, that it isn't as intriguing, or it isn't as profitable for the person you outsource it to. So they may not be as interested in a small job. It's certainly something we could explore, but we figured that this represents where we want to be.
And just
do you have more? Go ahead, Dan.
I just have one more to slip in, and here I may be getting into dangerous territory, but let me go for it anyways. Is the thought with this that this is a good alternative to what was talked about at town meeting last year with the artificial turf, and this is kind of the sensible alternative to that if not going with artificial turf? Is that a way to think about this? Kind of, sort of.
I mean, I suppose they were both options for increasing the play surface, right? This won't get us the hours that the artificial turf would. We would still have to be very careful about how we rotate the fields and when we're on them. And I think that the turf field, the artificial turf field, solves some problems that this can't solve.
Okay.
But in the end, I think that the goal of providing better playing surface for the kids, I mean, yeah, this helps us there for sure.
Yeah. Okay. That's it for me. Thanks. Very helpful. Appreciate it.
So one question I had is sort of notwithstanding the challenges of hiring and retaining, municipal staff right now. But if you were to, let's say, create a department that had full-time employed staff, do you feel like that would be a more cost-effective way to maintain the fields as opposed to outsourcing it like this? Or do you feel that outsourcing is actually probably the most cost-effective strategy?
I can speak to that a little bit. That I believe it was a year ago or possibly a year and a half ago that we had DPW they have a slice seeder. They came in, they did it. They did a pretty good job at it. But that's a fairly inexpensive piece of equipment. A good aerator runs $12,000, $15,000, $20,000. A deep tine aerator, we couldn't have afforded it. They started at about 100,000. So that's something that always has to get outsourced, and it's very high maintenance, that type of equipment, because some of this really puts a stress on tractors because of hitting rocks when they're aerating and that type of stuff. But
I would say a lot of this is materials as well. Grass is not cheap. Grass seed's not cheap. So, if let's say 60% of that's represented in materials and let's say 40% of it's labor, I don't know how many full-time employees that would potentially bring on with benefits and so forth. So
Yeah.
given the size of the area we're talking about, it may not make sense unless you're to somehow leverage that employee for other things outside of rec, which.
Hey,
Yeah.
Dave, I may have missed the answer to this already, but sorry, so is this a one-time thing? Is this a ongoing set of expenses? Will there be a partial amount that's ongoing, or, so, you know, again, one time or part of the operating budget going forward?
No, so this would be a yearly expense.
Gotcha.
And sorry, Steve, I don't know if you were on when I walked through what it is, but this is aeration and seeding and deep tining, like organic fertilizer, lime, and various just yearly maintenance.
Okay, and that's for all the fields. That's Laurel, that's Fessenden, that is,
And
any other
Jameson.
fields I'm missing?
Yep.
Which one? Oh, it's
Jameson.
Jameson, thank you.
Yep.
Steve, did you say, or Doug, did you say this is a total of about 12 acres, did I hear?
Correct.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I'm scratching my head because, you know, we do most of what you've just described on our own lawn, you know, 2 acres, and order of magnitude, you know, it's not even close. So, and I think you said you only had one, you know, one quote here. So I'm just thinking that there's got to be something really off about that one quote, just based on what I see in my own personal life and taking care of a lawn. I mean, I realize my lawn is not a playing field, but, you know, this, to me, this is a non-starter to, you know, to say you're going to increase your budget by 900% on a going forward basis. I mean, I think Dan asked, so go ahead.
All right, I will continue to try to get other people to bid it. You know, it's just, I've talked to 2 companies and they just said, Doug, we just don't have the time to do it. We're too busy and we don't have enough staff to probably do it anyway. But we're kind of caught in the middle right now.
Doug, just procedurally, anything the size of this requires at least 3 bids to be competitive,
Correct.
regardless of what excuse they use. And as an alternative, Jane offered her backyard as a field, I think.
Come on down.
Yeah, we'll see what Jane's yard looks like after a season.
I'll be over tomorrow morning.
Yeah, soccer cleats. Yeah, no, we would still, we recognize we still have to bid it out. I mean, I don't think that.
And what's happening now economically, and you know that inflation is inflation, and everyone's inflating their costs because of labor supply chain issues. But we as a town that's been in existence for 300 plus years have to kind of measure that over the next 2 or 3 years as to what the best practice is. And just because the short term may be to outsource it, the long term may be to, and I'm just making this up, go out to, you know, CMD and say, what will it cost for that department to get the capital to do this versus a high cost, ephemeral, current price.
And the 2 are not mutually exclusive, right? You can start with, you know, outsourcing it and getting and start working on the fields now, and also work on, you know, what would the cost be if we were to insource this? Right. I mean, I think the one thing that was universal when we went through talking about the artificial turf fields is that I think everyone I talked to agreed that we need to do something with the fields. Right. This is the alternative. And the longer we put it off, just every year is another year of playing on the surfaces that we have right now.
But do we generate the same revenue on okay fields because that's the alternative versus having to do something right now to make it ideal to have a field. Do you know what I'm saying? If we're a business here, if everyone has shitty fields, excuse my language, and this is recorded,
Going in the minutes.
and they're paying, yes, strike those from the minutes, please. Do we have a buy to say, let's do something intermediate to get it to where it needs to be, because we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be Sherborn-like, because the clients, though they may live in Sherborn, the alternatives are not Sherborn-like. And that's just a naive question.
I guess I don't understand the question. I mean, if the question is, are the fields acceptable the way that they are? I think the majority of the people that play on them would say no. They're injury prone. The kids don't want to play on them, right? They're a significant amount of dirt showing, right? So, I mean, could you play on dirt? Yeah, absolutely, you could. But I was elected as a rec commissioner to come and solve this problem, right?
Didn't you have a rec commissioner that played on like South African fields that like were?
No, that wasn't. He was not on the committee.
Oh, all right. I liked him. You should get him on the committee.
We can play on dirt. I mean, if that's I don't know that that's necessarily.
I'm not negating all the work that has been done here, but given all of the pressures on the town, in any town, with COVID, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, can we match the revenue with the expense outlaid? And is this necessary for next year, or can we spread it out and do it incrementally is maybe the question that I'm asking.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the annual cost. I don't think the rec department, if you really want good fields, I don't think you can look at it by revenue. You have to look at it as a benefit to the town in general. We bring in revenue. The revenue we bring in doesn't afford us the ability to maintain the fields at the level that everyone would like us to. So we've been running on a shoestring for a while, and it was clear that we were not going to be generating revenue via other streams. So, this is our opportunity to essentially try and, bring the fields up, the natural grass fields up to the level that we need them to be.
I have a question.
Sure.
I was wondering, did you go, there's ARA money. Did you apply or thinking of applying for a grant to get some ARA money to fix up the fields?
No, we did not look into any grant money.
Yeah, because we have, as a town, we have, I don't know, somebody else probably has a better track than me, of over $1 million worth of ARA funds. And you could apply for a grant to do whatever you wanted, see if you could get it from there.
Right, are you saying that you think they should use ARPA money for this?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, actually, yes. They have a capital project. They want some money to fix their fields. We have a ARPA money in a bank account. They should put in a grant request and ask for it to do that.
This isn't
not a capital project.
This is not capital. This is
okay, not capital, doesn't matter. ARPA money can be used for anything. So I'm just saying they have a request. Last year they wanted to, they want to refinish their fields. They have stuff they want to do to their fields, which why don't they put in a request for the ARPA funds for that?
I think part of the issue too.
What?
No, go ahead.
And by the way, put in an ARPA request to put a bathroom by Jameson Fields. Between Jameson Fields and the playground. I mean, there's $1 million there. Put in a request, you're in the rec commission, ask for money to build a bathroom there, just like at Farm Pond. That's all I have to say.
I think Natalie has some seeds to some solutions here. Is that what I'm hearing, Dave, is that the revenue won't cover what we hope and desire of having a Olympic field. So why don't we stage it so that it matches the revenue that comes in? And yes, get that South African person back on the board to tell you how tough it was to win an Olympic medal on a dirt field. And we'll get there over time. From what I'm hearing, I believe, is we have to get to the Olympic field before we're ready for the paying public or the reimbursement to cover that Olympic field.
This, yeah, it's clear, this doesn't increase the revenue at all. I mean, there's no offset in revenue by doing this, right? Or no increase in revenue. You know, staging it or not staging it isn't going to be offset by increased revenue one way or another.
No, but I think what Peter.
So shouldn't we look what that means is all I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, you have a revolving fund, right? I mean, you know, there should be some relationship between the revolving fund and the costs that you incur. I mean, that was the idea of the revolving fund.
Yeah, the revolving fund covers our other expenses.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we're on average, our revolving fund right now is about 100 grand, something like that. Our annual expenses are about 140,000, give or take, over the past few years. So, you know, the revolving fund's meant to cover those expenses.
If I may
And these
add,
as well.
What's that?
And these as well. I mean, that's been the deal all along. I mean, I did think about town meeting, right? Would you really want to get up at town meeting and tell the public that you want $135,000 more a year for the field? And you think that's justifiable? I mean, you know, honestly.
Jane,
you
I
gotta
would.
be real here.
Jane,
Yeah,
I
that's
would
what I'm
actually.
asking. I mean, there's plenty of people who play sports in this town, who are looking at those fields, sitting there going, I mean, who got up at town meeting and said, hey, look, why can't we manage these fields ourselves? Like, why can't we increase the quality of the natural grass fields? Sorry, go
Yeah, I mean, I think
Recreation
Jane,
Committee-
ultimately, I think that's what Dave is doing, is I think he is essentially asking town meeting to increase his budget by this amount. You know, like where I stand on this right now is that I almost feel like either that I'm not qualified or simply that I don't have enough information to make an informed decision as to how I feel about what such a significant budget increase. And I feel like, despite the fact that we are the advisory committee and it is our job to sort of look closely at all of these requests, something like this, ultimately, I feel kind of the same way as the turf field question last year, is that I'm kind of like, you know what, I need the general public to weigh in and the general public to vote on this. I feel like this is an issue where I think that we've raised a lot of valid questions so far in terms of, are there different ways that we could fund this? Can we do this stepwise? You know, I raised the question of, could we bring this in-house somehow? But at the end of the day, I feel like we have to have faith in our Recreation Commission to know the quality of their fields, the need to improve the fields, and to have explored various options for improving the fields. And then they're going to bring them to the town. And then I think the town, probably at the public hearing, this is going to be an item that we're obviously going to call a hold on and discuss separately from the rest of the budget. And the town is going to have their opportunity to weigh in on it. And I'm going to guess that at town meeting, it's also going to have a hold called on it, and the town's going to have a discussion, and the town's going to vote on whether or not they want to do this. You know, I mean, $135,000 it's not nothing. It's not you know, town altering. It's about 10 cents on the tax rate. and I think that we'll have to lay that out. And I think that if the rec commission can come up with other, either multiple bids and or some sort of an intermediate stepwise approach, so that people have other options that they're looking at, and then I think that the town is probably going to make a decision as to whether this is something that they want to do.
I think Steve Leahy had a comment.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate the opportunity. I'd actually just like to address a couple of different points. Peter, you had made a good point and asked Dave about, would we be able to offset some of this spend due to increased revenue that we could generate? And quite frankly, the Recreation Committee and a number of other volunteers put together an incredible detailed package and plan last year that would do just that. It would be a bigger spend, but it would have had more than enough revenue to offset it. And that was voted down in a very close vote at town meeting, seemingly less to do with financial challenges and more to do with land use or conservation or water rights. So asking the Recreation to come up with revenue here, I think I would dare say they did more than a good faith effort to make that happen last year, and it was shut down, unfortunately. To Natalie's point about ARPA money, I actually think that's not a bad ask of the select board. Obviously, it has to be qualified under ARPA rules, but the Council on Aging, whose warrant got shot down at town meeting, they got their $40,000 to do a study from the board of the select board. And so maybe, Dave, this is something to run by the select board and see what they would say to that. And my final point here is that, in a way, this $135,000 ask, I agree with Steve Tsai that we have to expect that the leaders of the departments that are running our town are doing so with their best efforts to do it responsibly. And then finally, any monies, whether it's $135,000 or some number less, is really a vote in favor of the kids of this town, to get playing fields that are at least starting to get up to speed with some of the towns around us. Thanks.
Steve, and I knew you were going to say that because it's the right thing to say, is the return on investment. This town is known for the feeder programs into, and I'll be quite honest, state titles, field hockey, lacrosse, football did very well. And it was because of the facilities and opportunities that were provided early on. And I remember those softball fields, though we didn't win a title, though many people enjoyed softball, that were invested in for the youth. And it did pay off. Lacrosse being the one that comes to mind most recently. So Dave, if put this together in package. I know we had a tough battle last town meeting, rubber or tree pieces were going to be part of the field, but ultimately it was for the younger generation to go through the system of education and athletics to maximize their ability. And Dover Sherborn has shown that we can maximize those abilities in education and athletics. For the last, you can go back and show how we've ranked athletically and specific sports and academically against other towns because of committees like us that invest in the future of both towns. So I'm with you. You just have to have a better sell to say, do this and we will have renewable resources that can be used into perpetuity, and it will benefit those townspeople that so choose to either use the fields for natural education. And some people said, well, my kid's not going to be a champion. He just wants to learn to play soccer, which is fine. And those that may have the propensity to go further.
Could I jump in with just a couple quick comments? So one reaction on the ARPA funding is one, I think, complication with that is if there were an ARPA grant for 135K this year, then next year we'd be right back here having this conversation again, because the ARPA funds is going to be a one-time thing. So that would be covering this ongoing operating expense for 1 year. And then having done it, we'd be in this situation of, well, now we kind of have to continue doing it, or it's going to slip back. So the ARPA funding seems like maybe that's designed for sort of one-time things rather than for ongoing operating things. And I guess the other question that I'd raise is, given what happened at town meeting last year, it seemed like, I don't know if the artificial turf fields, maybe on that scale from 1 to 10 would have been a 9 or a 10 quality. But last year at town meeting, the town said didn't support a project that would have gotten things to a quality of 9 or 10. So it's not obvious to me that the town would support 135K a year to get the fields to quality 8. And I guess, I'd come back to the question that I raised before of whether maybe there's something that would be a bit less expensive that might get the field to quality 6 or something like that, that would be not quite such a big chunk of money. So just a couple reactions to the conversation.
Thanks. And I totally agree about the ARPA money. I think that was what I was going to respond about it, is that, I think Dave indicated this was sort of the ongoing annual expense. So the ARPA would only cover year 1 of that. I would like
use
to.
the ARPA money to do like the cork field and replace the whole thing in cork, like they said they were going to do last year. Do something big with it.
Wait, but
Last year they went to town meeting. They asked for a ton of money to like replace the fields with ground up tires or something, and it got voted down, right? And so now he's coming back. I admit I don't fully understand this, but he came back now and wants to fix the fields, which I assume for less money. But what if they went and asked for ARPA money to do the same thing they wanted to do last year, like in cork or some? I heard there was a cork thing going on.
No, the ARPA money would not cover the cost of that.
I understand that the ARPA
field.
money will cover anything we want it to. Jane, isn't that
No.
what we understand?
No, Natalie, stop, Natalie.
Okay.
That field replacement, what was the cost of that, Dave?
We were asking for $1 million.
How much? Sorry, how much was that?
It was $1 million that we were going to pay back.
Yeah, so, so that would wipe out the entire ARPA fund.
Why not? Jane, what is it? What are the rules about using this ARPA money? I thought there really weren't any.
I think Deb could probably answer that. She's been working with the consultant on what the parameters are, so she's probably the best person to answer that.
I guess I don't understand, Natalie. Are you suggesting we go back to proposing the artificial field?
I don't, you have ARPA money and it's being frittered away by different people getting little amounts. And I'm thinking, why not somebody think about going in and getting a big amount to do something that will last for a long time? I don't know.
It would, I'm just going to respond to that, but I think we're getting off track on this budget. But the problem, Natalie, is that project was voted down by more than 50% of the town at town meeting. Like, we're not gonna just turn around and use our entire ARPA fund to then do that project that more than half of the town voted down. That's like, even the select board would never do that.
Okay, but
so
I'm not saying do the exact project, but if somebody in the rec department needs some kind of big amount of money to bring the fields up to standard, and we have ARPA money, it seemed like it'd be a place to be. I'm not saying the exact project for the same amount of money, But it seemed like that's a well we could go to get a chunk of money to help them. But the town meeting also voted down the study for the senior center, but they're doing that, right?
Well, they're doing something slightly different, and
Yeah.
but you know.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
Dave, one more question. Sorry if we've covered this a little bit. I apologize, but what are your guys' thoughts on trying to internalize this and like sort of invest in equipment that we'd be able to sort of do this ourselves, or is that not feasible?
Yeah, Peter brought that up earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I mean, we probably have to, if we want to get started on the fields, then that's the ask, and we can look at, you know, what does it cost for a full-time employee if that's what we need? What does it cost for the equipment? And you know, that might be something that we could potentially pull in-house over the course of a couple of years. I would anticipate if we went down that route, there'd be some pretty extensive capital requests. So, but yeah, certainly, like I said, I mean, they're not, if we choose, you know, if the town votes for the 135, that doesn't mean that that's the solution forever.
Okay.
Dave, I used to cut ball fields in the city of Waltham for the summer, and they were meticulously groomed. And it's a city, we're a town, we're in an evolution of use of these resources. Can we invest? And I'll go along with that, hiring a person to utilize those resources to get the benefit that most people, a majority of people, will agree. We all love championships. We all love the sport seems to do well. We all love the education that sports brings, because any Saturday, Sunday, you go to a field and there's more parents and supporters on the field than there are children, because they know that that's part of the education, part of the upbringing that Sherborn and Dover, though I'll segregate them for this conversation, offer. And that's really the sell, is that, you know, how do we maximize that in terms of field usage, whether natural or artificial, to give each generation of Sherbornites and those moving in. I'm like the old person on the block. My kids are in college. Everyone beside me have new kids. They're little. I don't even have the swing set anymore, but they all do. But they came here to get that benefit that I came here to get, is that opportunity for education, both physical and mental, and that return on investment. And I believe that the populace would agree that that's what Sherborn's about, is developing the existing population that have been here for generations, the aging population that have been here for bringing up families, and the new population that want the benefit of the small town opportunity.
Peter, any interest in getting back into the business of cutting grass fields as you did years ago in Waltham?
Oh, I had fun driving those tractors. It was great. We just sat and cut grass, and it was good. But each town, each ward had a field, and every new ward had to have a field. So it was political, and I understand politics, as we all do, and the want and needs of the electorate. and the wants and needs of the electorate is to have great education, both mental and physical. And Dave, I commend you for accelerating that physical education and the opportunities to do great things as we have.
I know we've discussed this at length, but can I just get a couple of questions in there, if okay?
Yes, go ahead.
So is this the fields, even though we play with Dover in many sports, but the fields are separate and the maintenance of these fields is separate. Is that correct?
Correct. Both Dover has a rec department that manages their fields, and we split time between the teams. So it's probably it works out to about 50-50 in terms of field usage.
I see. Is there like opportunities for pooling resources either with Dover or maybe even other surrounding towns? Let's say if we were to invest in the, some of the equipment or anything like that. Is that something that is feasible, or that's really no, there are reasons why not to do so?
I mean, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about approaching Dover or Natick or Framingham or any other town. I mean, I don't know that, other than the fact that, we have a school system, that's shared. I don't know why Dover would necessarily be interested in doing that, but I can ask them. I don't know where it gets us though. Because remember that there's a significant amount of this is still materials. You're still talking about sand. You're still talking about grass. You're still talking about fertilizer. It's not just the sharing of the equipment, right? It's the labor costs. It's the actual materials themselves.
Okay. My second question was going to be about, volunteers doing some of the work and maybe bring down some of but it sounds like that's, roughly what's the breakdown between labor and material here? I have no idea. So like,
I don't have it broken down. I don't know, Doug,
but just a very rough idea. Is it like 50-50?
I threw out a 60-40, but I don't know how accurate that is.
60 being material?
Yeah, 60 being material.
I see.
Wasim, I raked every infield of a softball field between games, before and after, that my daughter played in, and it was over 100. And so there is voluntary participation. You give them the fields or the ability to play, and parents will volunteer. Now, how do you quantify that? That's tough, because no one asked Peter, how much do we owe you for raking the field? But again, it's part of the culture, and it's a tough question for Dave to answer, and I just give some insight.
Okay, and then one very minor question. If you do this better drainage for the field, I'm just curious, is that going to make the grass die when we have a dry year, or that's unrelated?
So, I mean, we're always at the risk of whatever happens from, in terms of Mother Nature, right? You put grass seed down and it doesn't rain, the grass seed's not going to grow. So that's, we don't have irrigation right now.
No, sorry, I meant the drainage. Like you mentioned something about drainage, maybe putting some sand to help with the drainage. Now I was wondering, does that negatively impact if we, like the past couple of years, we've had very good rains, but what if you have dry years? Does end up hurting us? I'm just curious.
No, that's pheasant specifically, which actually retains a significant amount of water. I can't see a dry year necessary. Actually, a dry year would probably be good for pheasant because it holds so much water.
If I could just,
all right, thanks.
If I could just add something, the grasses that are now being produced for athletic fields is totally different than it was like 5 to 10 years ago. The grasses now used to be, I can't remember the name, but now they're going with a grass that is very tolerant to drought. and it comes back quickly. And so we talked about it this morning, and things are changing quickly in the turf fields. If you go back when you were playing, they only had one seed they would put down. Now you have the option of putting down probably 10 or 15 different types of seed on an athletic field. So there's a lot of moving around with how you can grow grass now. But one of the things I wanted to mention is when it's a breakout, the breakout now really should be labor, equipment, since it's so specialized equipment, and then materials. So there's like 3 things that should be factored in, and just not labor. The equipment is the expensive part of it, the wear and tear. But some of this you do not want to own. You want to lease it or rent it, and then let the people that fix it that own it.
Thanks.
I would like to recognize Daryl Beardsley, who has patiently had her hand up for about the past half an hour. And Daryl, could you just specify whether you're speaking as a resident or as a member of the Board of Health?
Yes, I was going to do that. I am speaking as a resident. And I'd like to say that I agree with Dave in his assessment about the type of care that the fields have received. And that applies for quite a long time, because back in the early 2000s, the expenditures on the fields were not much different. It was minimalist and recognized as minimalist. And Sherborn was participating in a project with the town of Wellesley and some other towns I can't recall at the moment. And part of what we're looking at was what the opportunities were for organic management of fields. And one of the shining examples was what's being done, was and still is being done in Marblehead. And at that time, and again, over 15 years ago, Marblehead was just starting on the program to improve its fields organically. And they were certainly willing to share a lot of their information then. And now I believe they have something on the order of 15 fields. I don't know the exact number. In town, they've converted almost everything in town. They have a long history of working on this. They have cost numbers available and methods and lots of other information. There was a case study put out by UMass Lowell, I believe, that documents some of this, or Mass DEP, I forget which one. So there might be some lessons that could be learned from at least Marblehead, which is at least is a smaller town as well. There's also the city of Springfield has done this, but that might be very hard to compare to Sherborn. So there might be things to learn about. One, what are more normal costs that are expenditures for fields? Because it does seem maybe shocking to look at 6,000 up to 135, but 6 is, I'm going to say, based on that past experience and looking at other towns, extraordinarily low. And you might also get a sense of what might be the cost demands over time. And maybe they know, since I believe Marblehead does get contacted by lots of towns to find out about what they've done. Maybe there's also information out there about different options that folks have tried, whether it's what do you bring in-house, what do you outsource, all that kind of information. And that might just help figure this out.
Yeah,
using the
we've
lessons learned by others, I guess.
All right, we've talked to Marblehead. Actually, Doug, you talked to them, what, about 6 months ago?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that I can't remember the numbers. They gave us some numbers in terms of cost per acre, but they were significant. Do you recall?
I don't recall.
Do you recall that conversation? Yeah, it was a while ago. I think we probably have to go back and look at our notes. But we have reached out to Marblehead and understand what they've done, and sort of what's worked, what hasn't worked. I don't think that what we're proposing here even comes close to what Marblehead is spending per acre.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad you were able to maybe derive something from them.
Yeah.
I'll check my
All
notes.
right. I would like to rein this discussion in a little bit now. I think it's been good discussion. But we've spent an hour talking about the Recreation Commission, and I don't think that we have any sort of a conclusion. I think that what we owe to them is some sort of actual advice, according to our name or guidance, as to what they should do between now and the public hearing. So I'd like to do sort of a quick straw poll plus, I guess. As briefly as possible, I would like to call on each advisory member and find out what you think that the Recreation Commission should do in terms of having something to present to us at the public hearing. As far as I see it, the options would be just great, 135,000, just like you said, just present that as you've planned, or see if you can find some sort of an intermediate step that is feasible and still palatable to you and still sort of useful, and what that would cost and what the difference would be, versus how would it look if we just threw this out and said, just go back to doing what you've been doing each of the 5 past years, and what would that look like? I sort of see those as being the major categories of things they could reasonably do between now and the public hearing. I can start. I would suggest that that you probably have 2 options that you present. One would be essentially this, and then the other would be something that looks more like an intermediate step that costs less money and maybe improve the fields, but not to the same degree. And if the reality is that there's no feasible step that makes any sense, then that's good to know also. But I think those would be the options, and ultimately my feeling is sort of the same way that we did with the turf fields last year, is like, let the public hash it out and let the public decide.
Steve, just a question.
Yep.
In terms of process, obviously there'll be much discussion at public, hearing around the budget, but going into town meeting is sort of a binary thing. It's yes or no, right? So is the proposal that, hey, present different options, kind of get a sense for where the town is, and then come into town meeting with one of those options? Or can things be, are multiple options possible to be voted on at town meeting?
In a way, yes. The mechanics of it would be difficult, because essentially what will happen is that at the public hearing, advisory is going to make a specific recommendation and vote on that. And then that is going to be what is brought to town meeting. Mm-hmm. But the public can put a hold on that budget and then propose an amendment to your budget. And the amendment can be any amount of money that the public proposes. And then, each proposal would get voted on individually by town meeting, So if by the time town meeting came around, you had something else in mind that, wasn't what was approved at the public hearing, and then you or somebody you delegated at the town meeting decided, all right, I'm going to, put a hold, I'm going to raise my hand and propose an amendment and say, okay, instead of 135,000, we would like to propose that the Recreation Commission have a budget of X, and then there can be a discussion as to how that number came about and what you planned on doing with it. And then town meeting would vote on that. So it would not be binary. It's just that every single option that was out there would have to be raised separately as a motion, as an amendment to your budget at town meeting, and voted on separately.
Okay. All right. So better to go
It
into
would
town.
be best to have it at public hearing. Yeah. That's why I'm like, between now and public hearing, it would be nice to have the options and have them in a way that we as advisory could reasonably make a recommendation and vote it through.
Okay.
Brendan, how are you feeling about?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pretty much echo everything you said. I think this would be a really tough sell. I'm generally in support, but I think this will be a really tough sell at town meeting. And I want you to improve the fields. So I think an interim step might be more palatable to the town. So I think bang on doors and try to get more quotes, see what you can do. And if you come into town meeting or to the hearing and you're like, listen, we've got 3 quotes and they're all 135 plus, it is what it is. And then, the town just needs to vote on it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I get it.
Mark, what do you think?
My thought was exactly what Brendan just said. I think I'd feel a lot better about it if between now and the end of the process, we could see if we can find some other providers that might want to quote. If the numbers are all coming back similar, it's a lot easier to support it and move forward. But that's what my hope would be. I know you guys put in a lot of hard work, so much appreciated. But if there's a possibility, it'd be great to get a little more data.
Great. Jane?
Yeah, I would love to see the fields get improved. So I just think that this is a number that's probably just not something that, would be able to be sold to the town. So I would agree, and maybe add, not to just get additional quotes, but also maybe think creatively about, are there combinations of things that could be done? Is there some drainage work or something that would be more of a capital type request? That some work that could be done that would be foundational, that might be a capital request, and then the maintenance might be less year over year. I don't know what it is, what the, how to break it down, but if there are different ways to slice and dice it, I think it would be easier to, to sell it to the town.
Great. Wasim?
Yeah, so thank you, Jane. That was makes sense. Yeah, if there's a way to, let's say, if the drainage can be, let's say capital. I don't know if it is capital expenditure, but that would certainly help. Also, I'll echo what everyone else said. Being, having different multiple quotes. I would say be prepared with a backup option as well if this was not voted down. What's the next best thing? Be ready with that, as well as I think maybe the question didn't come up today, but maybe what kind of is this going to be organic? Is it not going to be? And what are the implications? Because that's going to open another can of worms. For just being, that's my advice. Be prepared with those things. And then I think ultimately this is going to be decided by the residents of the town. I don't think this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a hold on this at town meeting.
Thanks. Nat?
I think, I'm all for the town fields, and I think whatever you can do to get them through, and anything that is, quote, a one-time capital expenditure, I'd go after ARPA money to do it. And then the town, you only have to take to town meeting the maintenance money.
Thanks. Peter?
Thank you for leaving me for last.
No, you're
And
not
having-
last. Steve Leahy's last.
Well, I think regardless, having seen the benefit of the recreation promoting athletics throughout the life cycle of a student is what taxpayers move to Sherborn for. So you have to illustrate that, Doug and Dave, that this is an investment on our whole community, because we have shown excellence, which everyone likes excellence. So you can't find a parent that will say, no, we don't want to win a championship because it's too tough on our children. I've never heard that. So this is the necessary steps you have to take. You have to show the return on investment. Dover, Sherborn is known for having that. Sherborn specifically, Laurel Field, the investments, Jameson Fields, the investments in all of the town fields are very important for that quality of life that people buy houses to move and pay the taxes to move into Sherborn. And that's really the play. And we saw that last town meeting when it was it tires or was it wood chips, and did it make sense to have artificial turf, blah blah blah. Yes, it made sense to give the children the opportunity to excel at their athletic ability at the maximum level here in town versus driving far away or joining another team. Because we do have that history, we do have that legacy of excellence in athletics.
Peter, you're rambling. What do you want Dave to present to us at the public hearing?
Return on investment.
Okay, return on investment. Thank you. Steve?
I'm in favor. 135 is a lot, especially if it's an ongoing annual cost. If you can come back with something a little bit lower that still achieves a significant improvement in turf fields, I'm 100% behind it.
Great. Dave, Doug, do you guys have any?
Steve, can I jump in? Steve? I
Oh,
think you
sorry.
skipped over me.
Oh, sorry. Did I skip you? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You somehow moved from somewhere in the middle of my screen to the upper left of my screen. So that
The joys of Zoom.
Yeah.
Just really briefly, my read would be that 135K is going to be a tough sell at town meeting. So I think my suggestion would be kind of echoing what Steve said at the very beginning, having an alternative plan that's less expensive and maybe a staged plan of what we'd like to do is get to a level 8, but maybe we're going to get there over a period of 2 or 3 years. And, this year we're going to start and we're going to do these basic things, and a number that's noticeably less than 135 with maybe ultimately build up something like this. I think a plan like that is more likely to meet success than just coming in with, we want to do the 135 right from the start. I think people are going to have a hard time with that. I think, and especially because I think it's going to feel like a year when there's a lot of pressure on the budget. And so people are going to be more resistant than usual to new projects. So that would be kind of echoing what Steve said right at the beginning. That would be my suggestion.
Great. So then, Dave, Doug, do you guys have any sort of questions about your approach between now and the public hearing?
No, I appreciate all the feedback. I completely understand that, if possible, it makes sense to try and present something that's staged, and we can talk about what the benefits of that might be from a cost perspective. We can also talk about what does that mean from the field perspective, what we can expect over time. I think ultimately we kind of end in the same spot, whether that's 3 years from now or 5 years from now or whatever. But I think maybe it is more palatable if we get there slower. So we'll look at options. We'll see if it makes sense, and yeah, we can chat through all of that at the public meeting.
Great, thanks. And keep in mind, like what Natalie said, if there are sort of significant one-time improvements that you can envision, that those would be things I think that would be great candidates for ARPA money.
Okay, great.
Right. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have the cemetery. And so I believe, Chucky, is that you? Let me get the cemetery.
Next year, can we be earlier in the agenda? I'm old. It was an hour and 15 minutes, and we're going to take maybe 10.
Yeah.
Is that fair enough to ask?
Yes, it certainly is.
Okay. Our budget is the same. Whoa, I don't know what happened. Something
I
happened.
believe I just put your budget on the screen.
Oh, okay. I don't know how to do any of that stuff.
Yeah,
I feel all of a sudden like I'm not talking to anybody anymore. Okay.
Hang on a second here. Hang on, something's not right here. Hang on. Hang on, sorry.
I can tell you what the changes are.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Okay, we're going to ask for an additional 7,000. 2,000 is because we now have 3 acres that we're mowing that we haven't been mowing before. And the other 5 is for trees, which, as everybody knows, are killing everybody. We had we had 4 big trees come down this year, and 2 of them each cost us almost $5,000 to remove.
Each?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. One of them was up. As you all know, we have 8 cemeteries, and the biggest expense, like everywhere else in town now, is dead trees. And we've taken out a lot, and we have a whole bunch more marked to be taken out. If we have the money this year, we'll do it, and we'll just keep doing it every year with anything that we have. There was one up at New South, which is the cemetery on the side of the hill near Cider Hill. Anybody know that area? And a big tree in the back of that cemetery just literally tipped over. Big healthy tree, and the root ball came right up out of the ground. It was lying. Luckily, it hit a tree in Jen Jordan's property, and that caught it, or it would have gone through her house. And that one, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that street, but their house is kind of up on it's built up, and there's a stone wall all the way around it, like it's filled into this big stone wall. So you can't get any equipment up there. And then about a month ago, we had a big one come down at Pine Hill. It started at one corner of a lot, went kitty corner, 40-foot oak. Snapped during that big windstorm that they had down on the South Shore. And apparently we got a couple of gusts up here. And that one came down, and we got bids from 4,500 to 2,500. 2,500 was our contractor, Nat Dowse. It also broke a whole lot of gravestones when it came down. So we just want to keep going with the trees. And the other thing, I don't know how much you want me to talk, but we have a contract. I was interested in a little bit in what you were saying about recreation, because we do have a contractor. So we don't pay for any equipment, and we don't pay for any vacation days or insurance or anything like that. We are now on the 3rd year. You can renew the contract twice as long as you don't change anything in it. And we are now in the 3rd year. We'll have to go out to bid again this year. And the years that we go out to bid, there'll be a jump. His contract is level funded for this year, last year, and the year before, and then probably next year, because it's a new contract. You can expect next year there will be some kind of an increase. And I'll answer any questions.
Chucky, I want to thank you and the Cemetery Commission for all that you do. I do run through Pine Hill, and I saw that big tree that fell down, and I was calculating in my head the cost of remediating that and then fixing the headstones. And that's just one of the trees that you mentioned, but it's a necessary part of the budget. And so thank you for accumulating all the costs and future costs and assumptions, and the expansion to the Pine Hill, which is the back few acres there that are for the next residents.
Right. We're already using, I don't want to say we filled it, but we're well into using the area, the kind of that connecting neck between the back part and the older part in the back. We've sold a lot of lots up in there, and we're using them. And just to clarify, and I told Jane Matarazzo, who's our rep, that I'm putting it in our town report too, that we found out, which we did not know, and I've done this over 25 years, that insurance does not cover the gravestones. Town's insurance doesn't cover it because they are considered to be personal property, and the homeowner's insurance has to cover their own stones. And we've been advised that we should not pay to fix people's stones, because we're setting ourselves up for every time a branch falls, repairing the stones. I wasn't happy about it, but that was the ruling from the town's insurance carrier. Is David Williams still here? He might have a better handle on it than I do.
It's interesting.
I did put it in the town report this year. I don't know if anybody ever reads it, but it's in there advising people to check and be sure your homeowners covers it.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So anybody have any questions?
You're muted, Jane.
Sorry about that. This is something that I didn't think of the other day when we were chatting, Chucky, but with respect to the trees, and I think, Sean, you're on, right? Did I see that you're on? Sean Colleen, is he on?
He's on as Christina Colleen right now. It's possible he's in a different meeting as Sean Colleen.
Yeah,
Hey.
my
Hey.
question. Oh, Sean, is that you?
Yeah, but I missed the question. I would,
No, it's, I
I've been
haven't
listening
asked
the
it
whole
yet, so
time,
you
but
didn't miss it. You didn't miss it, Sean. I haven't asked it yet. No, it was just that, the cemetery needs money to do tree removal. And I was just wondering, I was thinking back to that appropriation that we made a couple of years ago out of the stabilization fund for trees. And I was just wondering if there was any money in that account that could be available to help with any of this.
it could be this year, but we've pretty much committed that to one more set of trees we're taking down that's going out to bid. I mean, if they need money this year, they could have it, but it's going to be gone because we're actually re-upping that in another article this year.
And Jane, I do want to say that I mentioned that 4 big trees came down. The town did take out 2 of those. They were what do you call it? Blocking the road going up the hill into the cemetery. And Sean, you guys are fantastic, and we really appreciate it.
I mean, I hear your point, Sean, that, the money won't be there forever, but it's such a tough year. I'm just wondering if there is some money available for the work that needs to be done this year, whether that might be a way to, save a few dollars in the FY23.
Jane, we still have some money left this year to do some work this year. Susan Tyler's going to be going up there with Nat Dowse, because I work with the people and they work with the maintenance.
Okay,
And,
I think
they're going to go up there and tag some trees, and then we're going to get somebody to come in and do some more tree work this winter or spring, we hope. And we do have the money for that in this year's budget.
I think I misunderstood. So Sean, you're talking about FY22. There might be money available in FY22, you mean, is that right? But not FY20.
20, we're in 22.
Right. But
You know, it's gone. It's not gone, but it's committed. So if advisory somehow needed to somehow fund something, we could do it, but we'd end up tapping something else. Everything we have in the budget and the rest of that appropriation from a few years ago is gonna be gone before the end of this fiscal. If that
okay. Okay, I had misunderstood. When you said this year, I thought you meant the year we were talking about, which is FY23. But you mean it's going to be gone already by the end of FY22?
It's gonna be.
Okay.
So the only way we could use it right now is if you needed to somehow cover a gap, but my assumption is you'd have that in a reserve if you needed to help the cemetery.
Thank you. Sorry to drag you in.
That's okay.
When it wasn't your time.
Chucky,
Jane, they already do a lot of stuff for us. I mean, they plow and they do a lot of small tasks that need doing. They're always available when we need them. They're really helpful.
Chucky, is there any value in the lumber, the wood that is off to the side from previous years and current years that we could yield some revenue? There's a lot of big trees that are seasoned, and if someone wanted firewood or someone wanted to do something with it.
If you don't mind, I'd love to answer that question.
Yeah, if anybody wants it, they can have it. We can't find anybody that wants it.
Okay.
John, go ahead and answer.
There's a negative value in all the oak logs that we have right now.
Okay.
The market's actually really getting constrained, even on the tree crews, on trying to get rid of chips and logs. So there's no value in wood sitting around right now, whether it's standing or down.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Chucky? All right. Hearing none, then I would say just present your budget as is at the public hearing.
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. All right, next up we have Farm Pond, and I believe Jeannie Guthrie is here for that one, yeah?
I am here.
All righty, let me just get the Farm Pond Revolving Fund on the screen here.
This one is going to be fairly easy.
All right, do it.
As you know, it's a revolving fund. It was put into place, I think, I want to say around 2010, maybe, because we used to have a regular budget, and they thought it would best to have a revolving fund and use the sticker sales because it was funding the beach, and not everybody uses the beach. So we did that. It's worked fairly well. We've been able to help fund the new docks a couple of years ago with the revolving fund. It is getting more expensive to operate the beach. Minimum wage is going up. We're probably going to raise the fees this year. We haven't done it since 2015. That it went from 50 to 75, I think, then. So we're probably looking at maybe 85 at least. The other thing that's starting to take some of the budget is, and it doesn't have anything really to do with the operation of the beach, but more the health of Farm Pond. We spent about almost $2,500 on erosion control this year. We've spent probably $1,000 between equipment, a microscope, some deep water testing equipment, and that's starting to add to what comes out of this revolving fund. So my thought was possibly, if not this year, because you guys are like overloaded with increases in budgets, but possibly next year, come up with a budget just for keeping track of the health of the pond, whether it be the new water testing that they're asking for, equipment. We have to have the rangers there in the morning from 6 to 9 every day, from April 1st to November 1st, and that costs us about $9,000 a year, and that's to make sure that the boats are all washed down to keep the invasives from getting into the pond. So we're kind of looking at possibly next year actually having a budget for that part, for the health of the pond, not for the operation of the beach.
How is that stuff being paid for right now?
It's
like
coming
the
out of the
Rangers?
revolving fund.
So I see. So essentially you're just saying that because it's getting more expensive, the revolving fund's not going to be able to handle it.
Right. And I think too is that the revolving fund was set into place for the operation of the beach to maintain Farm Pond. And this is outside the scope of that. So I think we're going to need a little more help with making sure that the pond stays as clean and healthy as it is.
And you would anticipate that sort of new budget would be on the order of 10, 15,000 a year, 20?
I'm thinking probably 15.
Okay. And would you anticipate I know it's hard to predict because we don't know how sticker sales are going to be this year and next year, right? But increasing to 85, you think that will be enough to cover the expenses?
I'm getting text here. I'm thinking that I was thinking 85. We've increased the amount of non-residents. We sell 150 and those are 300 a piece. So if we went 85, 90 for residents, that might help. I haven't I haven't really done the numbers, but it's gonna be an increase. I just need to go to the select board and get the approval.
Yeah. Were you able to sell all of the non-resident stickers last year?
No, we sold about 115 last year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's probably the only thing that we as advisory tend to care about with the revolving funds is to just to make sure that the revenues are covering the expenses as best as possible, you know. So essentially just you know, I'm sure you're aware of the idea of looking at your sticker prices and just trying to set them at whatever level you think you can sell them, and that they will adequately cover all of your expenses. And it's, I mean, COVID is just such a hot mess, so it's anyone's guess how it's going to go, you know. Yeah, but
if we can have swim team this year, that will help too, because then more Dover residents, they end up getting full stickers and they pay $300 for those. So that makes the difference also.
Yeah. Great.
Jeannie,
Any other?
if the if I may, Steve.
Yes,
if
no, go ahead.
The added cost is in the invasive species of plants from boats and the moorings.
Right.
Could we increase that element of the revenue?
I mean, we don't sell that many boat stickers that would cover it. They're $40 a piece now. The moorings are total yacht club. We don't have anything to do with the moorings.
What I'm getting at is if the revenue can absorb through either out of town, in town, and that may be a lightning rod, or mooring revenue receipts to cover the incremental cost to the invasive species, the other additional costs. Are we able to do that and break even?
If I did that, just to have the rangers, the salary to keep the rangers there 7 months out of the year, 7 days a week, is about $8,800. And if I sell maybe 150 boat permits, they'd have to be $500 a piece to cover the cost.
Okay.
So I don't think that would work. I mean, it's a great idea, but right now we sell them.
So we're subsidizing the rights to have boats on farm pond because of the added cost. And so that's a decision the town explicitly, implicitly makes. But can we share that across everyone that uses the pond? Because the costs are going up, and not to burden just the boat owners, but you know, the in town, out of town. Can we elevate those so that we cover the cost is the question. And it may be unpopular to answer, but that's okay. I can ask the question.
Yeah, no, and we used to, the boat permits were $20. They're now $40. I don't know how much I would put them. I don't know. I would have to see how much to raise a boat permit. I don't know.
Well, that's where everyone's at. Yeah, consumer price index came out at 7.4%, and Dan will probably correct me. So inflation is here, and so costs are going up. And in addition to that, we have some threats of monitoring and maintaining the vessels that are there or people that use the pond to ensure that invasive species don't endanger the natural habitat. So my question is, how high can we increase all of the rates to cover the cost?
To cover like a $15,000 increase, I would have
All-
to.
Yeah, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but that's really the question is, if users want to use the pond and it costs more to keep a safe pond from invasive species and to have the luxury that we've always enjoyed, what is the cost that the town bores? What do we subsidize? And how can we reduce that subsidy?
Well, I think also besides just keeping invasives out and making sure the pond is healthy, that it's a water resource for the town, potential water resource for the town, and it's for the whole town. So I think that's another added thing to look at. So it's not just because people want to put their boats in, or we're trying to keep the invasives out from the boats. It's a pretty important water resource for the whole town.
So that would be embedded in the tax base for all of the taxpayers.
I think
is what I'm hearing. Yeah.
that's kind of how I was looking at it. Yes.
I think there's a reasonable argument to be made also that everybody's property values in town is raised by the existence of farm pond. So, it's not unreasonable to say some amount of the upkeep of farm pond is going to fall on the taxpayers and not simply on the actual individual users who are purchasing, stickers and licenses. So.
And it's that balance that I'm asking for.
Yeah, but I mean, I do think it's, obviously trying to figure out what is the appropriate level to set all of the various, revenue sources at is important, and again, keeping in mind that, inflation is going up and we need to keep up with it, Great. Any other questions or comments from advisory about the farm pond revolving fund?
A question for Jeannie, do we have any comps, for what other town pond moorings cost and, stickers cost that can help us determine what might be a competitive price?
I haven't looked at it in a couple of years. I know when we looked at it a couple of years ago, we were at the high end. And we have to be, obviously, we're a smaller town. We have less people to support the pond, but I can look at it again. Before I go in front of the select board, I'd have to look at that and see what other towns are charging.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions from advisory? All right. Well, once again, Daryl Beardsley has her hand up. Go ahead.
Speaking as a resident again. So Jeannie, I believe that Farm Pond is classified as a great pond in the state. And if so, I'm wondering if there are any requirements that the state has for making access to the pond to members of the general public outside of our borders reasonable. And then that would make perhaps raising fees a lot difficult.
Well, I know because it's a great pond, we have to provide access for fishing and fishing and fowl.
Yeah, I think it's fishing and fowling.
Fishing and fowl, and so people are supposed to have access to be able to go on the pond. And it's anybody. That's why we opened, that's why we're there between 6 and 9 in the morning, so we can make sure that the boats are washed down before they go in. And we open those up to between 6 and 9 in the morning, you do not have to have a sticker to park there. You don't have, you only have to have a boat permit to put your boat in, or you don't have to have a sticker to park and go swimming. And that's where we've allowed anybody to have access to it.
Yeah, so maybe raising the cost of the boat sticker a lot or permit might be
A
frowned
problem.
upon by the state.
Right. Could be.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from advisory?
Actually, I do have a question. Jeannie, you mentioned something that you wanted to defer until next year. I think it had to do with testing. Is that correct?
Well, no, what I wanted to defer till next year, because this year it's kind of came as a last minute idea, is to have a separate budget for testing for erosion control, because it affects the entire pond and it's for the health of the pond. We will continue to test. We're gonna test more frequently this year. There were several algae blooms that were a big concern. And those, when we can get testing from that, they have to be collected and sent off to UMass in Worcester, I believe. So we will continue testing in the pond and making sure that the health is where hopefully continues to be good, but global warming and the warm summers, and I mean, Daryl can attest to it, the water's warmer. We had algae blooms this year that we've never had before.
Got it. Got it. So then there's really no change. I mean, the testing is
There is
happening
no
right
change.
now. Okay, got it.
There is no change.
Got it. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments for Jeannie? All right, I think that's it. Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Next on the list is technically personnel, but since there's no budget for personnel, I think, Vicky, would you be okay if we did Board of Health's budget first and then, or did you have anything you wanted to say about personnel board?
No, I think that's fine, Steve. We don't have a
Great.
budget. And if somebody wants to talk about personnel, that's okay as well. And we can wait, or we can take it up at another time.
Well, I guess, let's see, if Daryl and Ellen are both here, do you guys have a preference in terms of presenting your budget right now versus after a, I'm sure, very brief discussion with Vicky about personnel board?
If it's brief, then it seems reasonable rather than having her wait for hours, although I think our hours will be brief. I could be wrong.
I think, yeah, I think you're,
Thanks,
hopefully you're
Daryl.
both going to be very, very brief, right?
Ours will be brief.
But go ahead,
Yeah,
Vicky.
Vicky. So Vicky, the only thing I sort of wanted to kind of discuss with personnel board in general is that, in the past, I think that the personnel board's kind of stance on salary issues in people's budgets was like when somebody was proposing a new position, a new, paid employee position, or some sort of like a major job description change, that's when personnel board would be asked to sort of weigh in. But then when it was somebody like somebody's assistant wants to go from 12 hours to 18 hours, same job description, just saying that, okay, they just need more time to do the same job that they have been doing, or there are various new duties that have kind of creeped in. In the past, at least, personnel board has not wanted to actually have input on those types of requests, and it leaves advisory kind of as the position of deciding whether or not somebody's doing their job appropriately and whether X number of hours for Y tasks is accurate. And I guess my hope was to actually get personnel board more involved into those types of requests moving forward when existing positions are asking for some not huge increase in the number of hours, but still an increase in the number of hours. Do you have an opinion on that?
No, I think we should. Right now, between you and the town administrator, that's really who handles that. Our responsibilities in the bylaws really are very basic in terms of reviewing and giving opinions. So we don't have a deep responsibility with a lot of things that go on in human resources. So I think from hearing things, not just from you right now, but other things that we've talked about with other people in the past 6 months, things like this have come up, and there is a need for somebody in between to kind of look at this to make sure that things are being done properly. We started working on a handbook for committees to identify what those committees need to do, and the things they need to abide by. We just worked with the town clerk and Diane Moore to put together a list of people that haven't been sworn in, because basically they have to be sworn in to be on a committee. Otherwise, any voting that they have done is against the law. I mean, they shouldn't be voting if they're not sworn in. So we're trying to help some of the people that are in the administration really refine some of the things that they're doing and get some systems in place so they can check. There's a check and balance on things. So with what you're saying, I would agree that we would probably be open to getting more, speaking for myself, but I know, for Nick and Nancy, I think that we would be open to looking at a more active role in pursuing these things, so that when you get it, it's been researched, it's been managed, it's been talked about, and people have run it through. So I think it's a good idea. You have enough on your plate to deal with. I think this type of thing is something we can handle.
Great. That's mostly what I wanted to discuss with you, I think. Does anybody else from advisory have any for Vicky? And sorry, I just noticed that Nancy is also on this meeting. So either Vicky or Nancy, about personnel board and sort of how they interface with us in terms of budgets and specifically, salary numbers.
So just to be clear, your comment, Steve, is when someone moves from, let's say, 14 hours, like you said, to 16 or 18 hours, that's what you'd like the personnel board to be more involved in? How about cases where, a department wants 2, 3, or even one resource? Is that also something that you'd like the personnel board to be involved in, or no?
What do you mean by one? What do you mean by one resource?
Add a resource, for example.
Yeah, no, essentially, anytime somebody is asking for a substantive change in the paid personnel in their department, but ideally, I would like that to go through the personnel board first before it comes to advisory. Essentially, it seems like almost yearly there will be situations where somebody is asking for more hours for a particular employee in their department. And then usually our first question is, has personnel board weighed in on this? And then the answer is usually, oh, no, personnel board doesn't like to weigh in on these types of things. And then.
No, I think it's gone through town administrator, to be honest with you. We've never seen anything. Nobody's brought anything to us. So I can make sure or talk to somebody about maybe changing the requirements for that and have that be part of what we do as well.
Yeah. And to me, it doesn't have to be a long drawn out thing with the personnel board. It's just kind of like, you guys review this request and, you decide if it seems appropriate or not. And then we know when it comes before us that it's been vetted that, yes, this is necessary,
Right. I think that's a good idea. I'll follow up with that.
Thanks.
So currently, Vicky, the personnel board looks at what's the right compensation level, or is that what you currently look into?
We work with the town administrator in terms of managing all of that. It's a personnel admin plan, has all of that written, all of that down. And so what we do is work within those parameters and review it with the town administrator to make sure that positions that have to be either changed because of the job has changed or because requirements have changed. That all gets factored in and either gets changed to another level, and we look to make sure if that level is met, then is the same as the compensation equivalent to that. So we review that so that that's a part of what we do now. And we did a big overview of it a year or so ago to make sure we remanaged all of the different types of job calculations and where they all fit in. So David and I went through that and made sure that they were all correct.
I see. So if sorry, forgive me if so if I understand correctly,
No, that's okay.
You look at the function, well, what's the word, the right word? The function, or the level, right? And then the almost the level or and the rate, let's say, right? Is that correct? What's the right level for this position and what's the rate? But you don't necessarily look at, you know, how many hours are needed to achieve something, right? That's different, right? That's really a department manager type function, right? Or maybe a town administrator.
It is a department. It falls on the department, but it does have to be approved. Nancy, did you want to add something to that?
I can't speak until you call our meeting to order.
Oh, geez.
Oh,
That's right. We're a quorum. Okay, I call our meeting to order.
Yes, we're
8:53
posted.
PM.
Okay, great.
Sorry. I totally forgot.
In the bylaw, Vicky's right. We were assigned to determine rates, and advisory basically decided what they would pay for hours. But years ago, and I'm ancient history, advisory did ask personnel to take a more active role because they didn't know how many hours it took to do a job. And we used to do surveys. We hired someone to do surveys. We found that wasn't very efficient because you couldn't match apples to apples and oranges to oranges with a lot of the different jobs. So we started doing the surveys ourselves with the help of department heads and so forth to come up with what seemed to be a fair description of the job and the hours that it should be funded for it. And when the new job description went in for the town administrator to take a more active role in the.
Well, I'm on the phone.
Oh,
I'm on the meeting.
Sorry, I just muted him.
Okay. To take more active role with the human resource part, then that sort of slipped out of our purview. But
yeah,
I
that's
think,
exactly what happened.
And I think that you are right on the mark where when it comes to you, it's really unfair to ask you what it takes to do a job. I think that's something that you should hand off to a group, and personnel seems to be the right group to look into it. So when it comes to you, there's been some determination as to whether it's a fair ask.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Makes sense.
That's what I want.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Vicky or Nancy?
I think I have to adjourn the meeting, don't I, Nancy?
Yes, you do.
See, we're only 3 members and 2 makes a quorum. So right now I adjourn 8:55. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All
Thank you
right,
very much.
Thank you, guys. All right, Daryl and Ellen, thank you so much for waiting so patiently. Let me try to get your budget on screen here. All right. Oh, darn it. All right. Go ahead.
So now I'm speaking as Chair of the Board of Health. And I don't know what you might like to ask. The shortest description of this budget is that basically we applied the 4% COLA, and that accounts for most of the increase. And then it just looks a little funny because the slight difference from 4% is partly attributable to the animal inspector line, because we pay the animal inspector both for labor and for expenses, and that's both in that line. So, and the expenses we did not increase, but we did increase the labor portion. So if you want more details, you can let me know which they are, but obviously it's pretty flat given that COLA caveat.
Yeah. So just going through the sort of smaller line items that are kind of staying flat. Telephone, what is it that you guys are paying $2,700 for? Is that just?
Ellen, do you want to describe the details of that?
Yeah, that line is the Board of Health office phone, the Board of Health fax line, and the food inspector and health agent cell phones.
Okay. And so those essentially are just the sort of like contracts or sort of the baseline cost of your lines.
Yes.
Okay.
And those were arranged through, I believe Jeannie Guthrie helped us with that. So it was through the town's phone accounts.
Okay. Do we know, is any of that stuff things that would now be actually aggregated under the town's new IT budget?
I believe they are. It is. And this is just our portion. They charge our budget for our phones.
Because Deb, do you know, because we actually have an actual IT department now this year, right? And so weren't we pulling the things that were previously distributed out into the other departments? Were we pulling those into a new IT department?
Not really for fiscal year 22. For going forward for fiscal year 23, we're trying to decide exactly what should be pulled over to the IT department. We had a brief meeting with Sean and Zach and some of the bigger departments trying to figure out what can be considered IT and what can't, and really no decisions have been made. So okay. Yeah, it could roll over into the IT budget. If that would be the case, we would just take this line item out of this budget and move it to the IT budget.
Okay, so there's a potential that 2,700 essentially would just get zeroed out and go into the IT budget.
That's correct.
But it is not currently being double counted.
No, it's not.
Okay. Great. Let's see. And then office supplies, is that just kind of like randomly throughout the year? I can see that in year-to-date FY22, you've only used $122 of that 1,900 budget. But are there things that you typically purchase in the second half of the year that are kind of constant and reliable?
Absolutely.
Ellen, I'll let you do that one too. You know the details.
Yeah, and I mean, we've already purchased envelopes, and I had to purchase a new date stamp, received stamp, which I'm still waiting to receive. And there'll be the typical office expenses. And I try to hold off as long as possible, but sure. It'll be spent.
Okay. And then new equipment, what sorts of things typically go into new equipment? I can see that in 19, 20, and 21, there was a lot of fluctuation in that in that
It's
number?
in fiscal year 20, that was a computer for the health agent. Fiscal year 21, that was the new Sharps disposal
Oh, yeah,
unit.
yeah.
And now that line should probably be renamed. It's really, I just didn't know where to put the fiscal year 22 and next year is that 2,220. That's the annual maintenance for the Sharps disposal unit and the
Okay,
insurance and the medical waste disposal.
okay. All right,
And
that
they,
makes sense.
I did ask if it would increase in fiscal year 23, and they responded that they really don't know what will happen next July, but if there's an increase, it should be minor.
Great. Well, that's all I've got. I'd say essentially the only question mark there then is the telephone line as to whether that will get pulled out into the IT budget, but otherwise looks okay to me. Anybody else from advisory have comments or questions?
None here.
All right.
Ooh,
Great.
did we get a prize for being the shortest?
Yeah. you get to go home now.
Okay.
Unless you really want to listen to us
No,
go over last
that's
meeting's
fine.
minutes,
We'll go.
you know.
We'll take
Yeah.
that.
All right.
Okay. Well, let us
all
know
right.
if you have any other questions.
Right, will do.
Anytime
Thank you.
after tonight. Okay.
All
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. All right. Last, we have the minutes from the last meeting. I know, Deb, you had sent me some corrections to these minutes, so I'll have to bring that up and do those on screen. But does anybody else have any other? Hang on a second, let me get these on screen here. Minutes. Did anybody have any corrections that they wanted to make to these minutes?
I just noted that about 2/3 of the way down the page, you're showing Steve, Jackie Morris's last name there's a typo. Just so we don't annoy anybody by misspelling names.
Yeah, well, I think Deb's name was misspelled. Let's see here.
Jane, you're muted.
Jane, you're muted.
Sorry about that. It looks like maybe that's just a stray line. There's something about tree services in Jackie's description.
Here we go.
I think that's probably just a carryover from something you were copying. and
Yeah,
pasting.
I think I forgot to delete that when I kind of brought over the template. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
So that's just
Yep.
gone, right?
Thank you.
Question about the accounting section. Note 3, was that intended to be part of the minutes, or were you asking a question about whether we should have something in the minutes there?
Sorry, that was probably a question for myself. So you kind of, I inserted my own notes with the minutes. My apologies. You can, Steve, you can probably cut that out.
Strike that. All right. All right, so let me see here. So Deb had a couple corrections here under town clerk and elections.
That after the $2,200, it shouldn't be excess spending, but maybe increased spending.
Right. And then let's see, in the accounting section.
It wasn't added payroll benefits coordinated. It was adjusted the payroll and benefits coordinator for a salary increase. Her hours remain the same. And then where it says the biannual audit, it's really for the biannual actuarial audit. There you go.
Audit. Right. And down here, discussion of capital stabilization.
Yep.
And we did not close at 89.35.
Oh,
all right.
Can I ask one other question about the in the debt service discussion? The references to the, oh, it says capital stabilization fund. Okay, that's a change, right? Because I
just changed that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that was one of the changes that Deb had caught. So
Didn't we go till about 9:30 last week?
Was it 9:35 and not 8:35?
Yeah, I think it was 9:35.
all right. Any other changes to the minutes? All right. If not, then we will.
So maybe the last one in the liaison reports, I think it was not the upgrades, right? I think even in last meeting it was mentioned it's maintenance, not upgrade, right? If I recall correctly.
You're right.
I don't want to modify
the.
I don't want to modify the the liaison report, but I believe I heard last meeting that it was maintenance, not upgrade. So I don't know if you had mentioned this, you know, Brendan or someone else did. But anyway, just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I think maintenance is fine.
Okay.
Interesting. Doug actually had me create that new account and put in field upgrades. And then when he said, you know what, no, it's really field maintenance. I'm like, well, I guess it depends on who you talk to.
Yeah, apparently it does. Well, Dave is the chair, so I guess go with him.
That's right. No questions asked.
All right. Any other edits? If not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the January 5th, 2022 meeting as edited on screen?
So moved.
Second.
All right, let's do a vote. Brendan?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Wasim?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Natalie?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. All right, so those are approved unanimously. And then before we adjourn, I also want to just do kind of a brief discussion of the budget model, because I believe this is the first meeting that we've had since getting essentially the first budget model since everyone's budgets are in. Let me put this on screen also. Very just high level overview. So the overall budget increase it's significant, right? It's slightly over $2 million, which is a 6.84% increase. You know, there are various things that are larger components of that, you know, debt service, obviously the very large recreation ask, and then the schools are both coming in at around 5-6%. But, you know, at the end of the day, we also have to remember, one, our guidance was to increase salaries by 4%, and then two, you know, inflation is happening, right? And as Peter noted, what CPI are we at 7.4%? I actually haven't been keeping up, but I'm going to take it on faith if that's the current number.
The number today was 7% up from a year ago.
7%. So, so actually, our omnibus increase is not keeping up with inflation. So keep that in mind, I think, as we are moving forward and trying to chip away at everyone's budget. I think the past several years, we got lulled into the sense of, you know, inflation being somewhere from 0 to 2% every year, and that our goal was really to be as close to level funded as possible. And I think that this year, it's not even going to be a possibility for the town to be anywhere close to level funded. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, if we have a $2 million increase in our budget with no increase in property values, we are, you know, our tax rate's going up by over $1. So I think essentially we just have to have a lot of faith that the property values are going to be moving up along with inflation. I think that generally speaking, the real estate sales seem to be indicating that they will, but we just kind of have to wait to see how it goes. But I just wanted to just bring that up since we now do have a budget model. And I wanted to just see if anybody else had any other sort of sweeping first impressions and thoughts about the budget model now that we have it.
I had a question about it. I guess a question for Deb. If you look at the summary, it seems to indicate that we are way over the maximum allowable levy. But then if you look in the tax levy calculation, it looks like we're under the maximum allowable levy. So Deb, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, if you can maybe just help us understand that.
Well, I was going to say, I really haven't spent any time on that. I am doing the job of two people right now. So this really, I mean, I haven't spent any time trying to get any of that to make sense. So as I said in my email, basically the only thing in the budget model that is accurate is the truly budget numbers. The rest of it has to be updated. Sharon really did a lot of plugging. So a lot of the calculations aren't like carrying over. So I'm going to have to go back, and it's going to take a lot of time to actually make it make sense.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I wasn't trying to call out, you know, anything like that. I just, if we really are way over the maximum allowable levy, that's like a whole different order of magnitude, I think, of an issue. You know,
yeah, well, a lot of it's going to have to do with the property values, the increase from this year to next year, and so that will increase, that will change everything. So I wouldn't panic just yet. I'll try to spend some time on it and see if I can.
Jade, I didn't even look at the summary page because I knew that Deb had said that, you know, she hadn't gone through to double check this. And, you know, at the end of last year, well, basically coming right up to town meeting last year, I had to go through and troubleshoot a lot of the issues in the budget model, and I found exactly what Deb is saying, is that a lot of the numbers were simply plugged in. They weren't actually calculated from other cells, and so then I had to do a lot of hunting and pecking to try to figure out where those numbers came from. So yes, I think Deb has quite a job ahead of her to get this whole thing actually flowing the way that it's supposed to. So all I did was look at the page that had all the budgets and said, all right, what's this year's omnibus compared to last year's, and what's the percentage increase? What are we working with here? So
yeah, no, understood. And Deb, I hope you didn't think I was trying to give you a hard time or anything. I
Oh,
just,
no, not at all. It's just a little overwhelming sometimes.
One thing, if I may, that I would find useful and I think might be helpful in describing this increase to people is of the 2 million increase, I can see about 300,000 is from debt service. Would be interesting to know how much is from wages and salaries and to sort of break that down into components. Because of course, as Steve said, 4% COLA. So that's kind of baked in. The debt service, that's kind of baked in. So how much of the 2 million is kind of new stuff? And since the wages and salaries and the debt service are going to be a big chunk of it, that might be a way of helping people understand that there's a debt service piece, there's an inflation piece, and have some perspective on how much new stuff is in here. So there's probably a way I could pull those out, and I can do a little digging in and look at that. But I think that would be an interesting set of numbers for us to have.
Yeah, I think honestly, Dan, and I totally agree with you. In the past years, that's the type of thing that I sort of do on my own to try to crunch through this.
I'm sure I can do the same thing, crunching through the numbers.
Yeah, and it's a very useful exercise, and that's the type of thing that when I make like introductory comments at the public hearing and things like that I try to give more of a high level overview to people about stuff like that. So yes, I think that's useful information. I think right now, given what Deb is tasked with doing, I would say why don't we try to take that on as individual advisory members, because it's there's a lot to work through on this spreadsheet. So as in my first year on advisory, I understood maybe 10% of this budget model. So over time, I've gradually expanded my understanding of what all of these tabs are and how they relate to one another. But I think the more you look at it and start playing around with it, the more you'll understand what's going on with this budget model.
I'm happy to dig in and look for some of those numbers. Just thinking very much along the lines you said is kind of a high level setup. I'm just catching up. I'm the newbie here. I haven't been through the whole year's process. Those just seem like there'll be valuable numbers for doing that high level kind of analysis.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. And it used to be easier because salary and expenses were separate accounts for each department, whereas now they are combined. So it's a little just it's sort of like one step harder to tease that out. But it's not too difficult. All right. Anybody else have any kind of big thoughts, comments about the budget as we're about to head into some of the bigger budgets? So,
Steve, I was just going to reiterate what you said to Dan there, and Dan, great questions. The best way to really learn this is to spend 45 minutes or an hour poking through that budget model spreadsheet, playing with different scenarios and checking out. I feel like, Steve, to your comments, I feel like the way I learned the ins and outs of this budget was to spend time in that spreadsheet.
Good, thanks. I started doing that earlier today, and I will do more of that. And that sounds exactly right. Thanks.
Great. Well, if not, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, let's vote. Dan?
Aye.
Brendan? Jane?
Aye.
Wasim?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Natalie?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. 9:20 p.m. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Have a good night.
See you again next week.
See you.